It's noon, so I'm going to start the recording. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Kennedy Cole, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis at The Ohio State University. I'm excited to welcome you to our second webinar in the series Data for Access and Opportunity. This series is co-sponsored by CURA, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and the Kirwan Center on the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State. Through the series, speakers from various fields will discuss how data contributes to a more equitable world. Today, Katie Ragstad will discuss the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning's Job Quality and Access tool and how it's being used for better decision making in the region. Before we introduce Katie, I want to mention a few logistical items. If you require closed captioning today, you will find a box on the bottom of the screen labeled CC. Click the box and select Show Subtitles. This will allow you to view subtitles during the presentation. I do want to make a quick note. We're having some technical difficulties with the closed captioning. So right now, unless we're able to fix it during the presentation, it's just going to be the live closed captioning. During the webinar, feel free to submit questions at any time using the Q&A box. We will ask as many of your questions as we can in the last portion of the presentation. And if we don't get to your question, apologies in advance. The chat has been disabled, so please use the Q&A if you have any information to share with the organizers. As you may have seen on our website, this event is approved for one AICP CM credit. To claim your CM credits, log into your My APA account on the APA website and enter the event into your online CM event log. There will be a brief survey at the end of the webinar. If you have time, we encourage you to provide your feedback to improve these events. If you have any additional questions following the event, don't hesitate to email us at kira@osu.edu. To learn more about MORPSE's work and future events, visit morpse.org. You can learn more about Kirwan at kirwan.osu.edu and Kira at kira.osu.edu. Now I'd like to turn things over to Dave Dixon, Director of Data Analytics and Strategy at MORPSE, who will introduce our speaker.
Dave, you're muted.
Thank you, Kennedy, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I can't overstate how excited I am about today's topic and our speaker. We're very lucky to have Katie Regstad. She's a senior planner at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or CMAP, and served as project manager for the recent update to the Job Quality and Access tool, which we'll be taking a look at. She brings 10 years of experience in community and economic development, with work ranging from corridor planning and tax increment financing to business improvement, district planning in Illinois and Michigan. In Metro Detroit, she also supported small business and entrepreneur growth. Katie holds a Master of Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Michigan. And with that, Katie, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Rigstad. I'm excited to be here today to talk about the Job Quality and Access tool. And so I'll get right into it. Maybe. There we go. All right. Just to give a quick review of what I'll cover today, I'll talk a bit about what went into creating the Job Quality and Access tool, the kinds of planning efforts and decisions that went into the creation of the tool, then more details about how the tool measures job quality and access, and then I have a few examples of how we've been using the tool this past few years since its creation. All right. So the Job Quality and Access tool is an online data resource available through CMAP's website, and the tool is hosted on Tableau, and it's pulling from a variety of data sources, including Lightcast, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census, and other resources to create a series of robust analyses to understand each occupation's quality and access in northeastern Illinois. On the web page, which is pictured on my slide here, CMAP also provides a user guide and a training to help users take full advantage of the tool. So the Job Quality and Access tool was created to support resilient economic growth. The tool helps users understand the nature of the workforce in their community and the larger region. It also helps the user evaluate jobs and their ability to support a good quality of life for the workforce. The tool aims to support partners in municipalities in northeastern Illinois to target planning and investments to support economic growth and resilience. It gives the region a shared language around job quality and job access, supporting collaboration and coordination. It is a tool that helps everyone row the boat in the same direction. I uh, I'm just gonna do a quick aside because a couple of my teammates are messaging me. I look funny because my cat scratched my eye, and so you're at a funny angle so that I can see you, but you can't see all of me. So I apologize for the funny camera angle. Who might use the tool? A potential user is a planner, workforce development organization, or economic development organization. This type of user is likely to be using the tool to evaluate how many and which residents will benefit from a proposed development. Some questions the tool can help answer include what industries or occupations should be prioritized due to the number of jobs, the quality, or access of those specific occupations, where there are gaps in access for the current workforce, and whether those gaps are geographic or demographic, and are the proposed jobs as part of a new development considered quality jobs, and are they accessible to the residents in the surrounding area. Another potential user is an employer, employee, or student. Questions that this type of user may ask from the tool are, what are the requirements to get into a target occupation? What might a future career path look like for someone in a particular occupation, and what kind of wages could be expected? Is the target occupation at risk of automation? And what high quality accessible jobs are near your current location? Okay, and so before getting into what the tool does, I wanted to give some background on why it was created. In 2020, CMAP studied the region's traded industry clusters. An industry cluster is a geographic concentration of interconnected companies, specialized suppliers, and supporting institutions that operate in a particular field. A traded cluster is a group of interlinked businesses that sell goods and services in markets outside of the region. With 22 specialized clusters, the Chicago region is the most diversified large U.S. metropolitan economy. This diversity creates new opportunities in sectors like energy storage, transportation technology, global finance, and product manufacturing. And traded clusters also tend to provide better jobs. So traded clusters, wait, sorry. Um, with traded clusters providing better jobs, they also account for a third of the region's total jobs, but more than half of its wages. But our traded clusters are declining and in need of support in order to continue growing. The report made a series of recommendations to support the region's traded clusters, and relevant recommendations that fed into the creation of the Job Quality and Access tool include prioritizing assistance to traded clusters to promote equitable growth in different parts of the region. When we get into the tool, you'll see how industry cluster and traded clusters are evaluated. And an additional goal was to articulate and invest in resources and high quality career pathways where knowledge, skills, and work values are transferable across multiple occupations and industry. So the tool includes measures that look at education and training, upward moves, and other qualities that can help identify these characteristics. Adopted in 2018 onto 2050 is the region's comprehensive plan, and the plan follows three key principles. Inclusive growth, which is growing our economy through opportunity for all. Resilience, meaning that we're prepared for rapid changes, both known and unknown. And prioritized investment, which is carefully targeting our resources to maximize benefit. On to 2050 has a prosperity chapter that is focused on economic growth, and relevant goals that came out of Onto 2050 for the Job Quality and Access tool include expanding data-driven approaches in workforce and education systems. So this tool is a resource to support data-driven decision-making in workforce training and educational needs, including measures around prerequisites that help identify those, and supporting the region's traded clusters as a way to prioritize pathways for upward economic mobility. So in the update to the tool, we had a user group, which I'll explain a little further in our next slide. But one of the recommendations that came from our user group was trying to align with how the state describes a quality job. To do this, we utilized the Future of Work in Illinois report, which states that a quality job provides a family-sustaining wage and benefits package, including access to health care and the ability for employees to take time off from their jobs when they are sick or need to take care of a sick family member without having to risk financial or career stability. A quality job offers safe working conditions for all of its workers and ensures a culture and environment that treats all workers with dignity and respect, including respect for workers' rights to form a union without interference and to organize and bargain collectively for better conditions. Additionally, a quality job provides workers with predictable work schedules, creates opportunities for training and advancement, and gives workers power and voice within their roles and organizations. So that's a really long definition of a quality job, but there are a few key things that we can measure out of that definition, which we do in the tool. These things include wages, a living wage, benefits, opportunity for advancement, ability to join a union, and unemployment rates. The job quality measure includes all of these measures, includes measurements for all of these characteristics. In the previous slide, I mentioned our user group. This was a multidisciplinary group of folks that work in economic development and workforce development. The role of this group was to help shape the inputs and measures, provide feedback to help improve user experience, and to flag emerging issues for incorporation, such as the risk of automation. This group helps CMAP think through data needs and the challenges in economic and workforce development the data can help explore, and how data in different forms can help collaboration. All right, so I will now get into more detail about how the tool works. First, how are we measuring job quality? For the job quality, for the tool, job quality is measuring how an occupation impacts a worker's quality of life. So it's asking questions like, are workers in a particular occupation earning a living wage? Can they collectively bargain? Are they receiving benefits? And this lets you explore compensation and how well a job performs based on your family makeup. Other aspects of the job that the job quality measure considers are things like, is this job stable? Can a worker rely on this job for years to come? And does the job have the opportunity for upward mobility? Is it a stepping stone or have transferable skills to a better paying job? In a little more detail about how some of those measures work, for earnings, you're looking at regional hourly earnings of the selected occupation compared to the selected minimum wage based on a family makeup. The data going into this includes percentiles from the BLS, hour living wage from an MIT calculator. Career opportunity is looking at regional hourly earnings or of related occupations compared to the selected occupations hourly earnings, and this is sourced from ONET. Benefits and unionization is looking at the occupation's the average employer's tendency to offer benefits and unionization rates, and this comes from NCS and CPS, and stability in occupations, unemployment, and turnover rates compared to the regional average. This is again sourced from BLS. Job access is looking to measure the barriers to acquiring a position. To do this, the tool is measuring things such as prerequisites, so education or experience requirements, the structure of work, is there flexible work options, can this job be done from home if needed, if the tool is looking at demographics of the workforce in an occupation in terms of sex and race or ethnicity. And the idea with this measure is that it can help start to uncover occupations that have a workforce that is impacted by biases or other barriers keeping specific people from being able to take opportunities. And while the measure for demographics is not a perfect measure, the working group felt that it was a good way to identify trends that could lead you to future point where you could do some further investigations. To break these measures down a little more, education is looking at the average educational requirements for an occupation compared to the regional average. This is sourced from ONET. The experience is looking at the average work experience requirements for an occupation compared to the regional average, again sourced from ONET. The demographic, occupation, sorry, make sure there's nothing for me. Okay. The demographics is looking at the occupation's demographic composition compared to the demographic composition of the region's workforce. And this data is from PEP and BLS. The structure measure is looking at an occupation's average employer's tendency to offer work from home, flexible daily activities, dependable schedules, and potentially fewer work hours. And this is compared to the average. And that data is coming from ACS and ONET. All right, so now we'll look at the actual tool. This is the landing page you see when you access the tool on CMAP's website. So as mentioned, this bubble is just highlighting that it is on CMAP's website. The overview provides more information on how to use features of the tool. A navigation bar located at the left also offers the option to turn on informational pop-ups that explain the various aspects of the tool. Other resources available, as mentioned, include that training video and user guide, which are also both hosted on the same web page. And then this menu in blue allows you to select an analysis to go directly to within the tool. This is the plot, the occupation plot. In this example, we're looking at what job quality and job access look like for healthcare practitioners. In the upper corner, you can select a geography that is either the region or a county. You can select the wage profile, meaning the living wage calculations will be adjusted based on the family makeup from a single adult up to a family of 5. And then you select an occupation group or an occupation. The tool allows you to adjust factor weights for quality and access, so you can emphasize a specific measure depending on the question that you are exploring. And after you make your selections, information will be displayed in the plot and the profile, and you can hover over any of the bubbles that you see in the plot to get additional information or select other occupation profiles. This is the Occupational Details tab. You may find yourself on this page to dive deeper into the quality and access of a particular occupation. You again, on this page, select from the region or the county, the household type for living wage needs, the occupation, and then the specific measure that you want to explore, and the evaluation factor within that measure. The occupation overview provides educational requirements, experience requirements, on-the-job training, and automation risk. In this example, we're looking at the demographic comparison factor. So this is looking at the occupation's demographics compared to the selected region's average. These graphics are color-coded, and so red is a factor that decreases access, and green is a factor that increases access. This is the same tool with a different factor. So you may find yourself looking at this to explore what the upward movement looks like for your selected occupation. The same options for setting what you would like to compare in terms of geographic, living wage, occupation, the measure, and factor. This is the same profile. The graph below is all occupations, which you can hover over this for more detailed information on a particular occupation that isn't the one that you've selected. And then this graph is showing anticipated earnings and future career pathways. Again, you can hover over this chart and get more detailed information on the occupation shown in the chart. This is the occupation map. You may find yourself using this tool to understand the largest occupations in a project area. It is important to note that this information is the smallest geography it can go down to is by zip code due to the data inputs that go into this part of the tool. You can choose the region or county and a geography including cities or villages. And you can also select contextual data. Again, I'll just flag that for cities and villages, it's going to pull all of the zip codes that touch a city or village boundary, which is just it's a nuance to keep in mind as you're using the tool. Um, the profile will show data for the top 10 occupations by resident worker. And then you can also hover over the map for data. There are additional layers that can be turned on to this map, including transit stops, municipal boundaries, and highways. Another analysis is the industry cluster page. So you may find yourself here to explore what industries offer the highest number of high quality and high access opportunities. You can select a geography of either the entire region or a specific county. Set traded or local clusters. And this particular view is the quality and access view. There is another option where you can get a general overview of all of the industries in the region. And this table will summarize key clusters by occupation quality and access. And again, you can hover over these bars to get additional details about the occupations making up each bucket. Okay, so now that we've gone through how the tool what went into tool creation and how the tool works, I have two examples of how CMAP has been using the tool in our work to support our work. I don't know what I was going to say. So the first is county housing readiness plans. In this example, we'll be looking at the McHenry County Housing Readiness Plan and the market study that is supporting this project. With this, the project team was interested in finding what are the most common jobs and the implications for housing needs and access. So this project team took the top 10 jobs from the Job Quality and Access tool and created an analysis to understand if the people in those jobs could afford to rent in McHenry County. This table is showing that there are only 2 jobs on that list that could afford renting all housing types available that were evaluated. And there are 2 positions that cannot afford any housing without being cost burdened. And while most can afford a studio, only 7% of rentals in McHenry County currently are studios. And so the way that the Job Quality and Access tool supported this project is that it made that initial data of those top 10 occupations very accessible for this team to use. And so they were able to pull the data from the tool to then explore further and build a more in-depth analysis that they would not have otherwise been able to do. Another example of how the job quality and access tool is being used is for the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan Workforce Appendix. This tool is helping the team explore how investing in lower greenhouse gas emissions may or may not create high-quality job opportunities. An example is that we can look at solar photovoltaic installers, and the Job Quality and Access tool reports that this is a more accessible job that requires only a high school diploma, but is at very high risk of automation, and that schedules tend to have limited flexibility and are somewhat irregular. So in terms of access, the tool shows us that the clean energy workforce is also not representative of the region, and less than 10% of the people in this occupation, as well as wind turbine service technician jobs, are less than 10% are filled by women. We're also able to note that training and outreach for new positions could include investments to help women access these jobs to increase the workforce that's ready to take on these opportunities. We're also exploring how workers in jobs that will decline may have opportunity to transfer their skills. An example of this is automotive service technicians and mechanics are an occupation that's anticipated to see a decline as investments are made in electric vehicles. And there are currently, for the Chicago region, 21,824 automotive service technicians and mechanics working. And then these jobs are classified as high quality and high access in the tool. 25% of the automotive technician and mechanic jobs pay a living wage for families with 2 adults and 2 children. And these jobs tend to be occupied by men with a larger representation of the Hispanic population when compared to the county's demographics. And the tool helps identify that people working as automotive technicians and mechanics have the ability to make an upward move into the electric motor power tool and related repairs occupation. There are currently only 602 people in the electric motor occupation within the CMAP region. These jobs are classified as lower quality but more accessible in the tool. And while 67% of these jobs offer a living wage for a family with 2 adults and 2 kids, the low quality rating is reflecting the higher rates of unemployment and lower rates of employer provided benefits. But overall, this could be an upward move for people working as automotive mechanics in a transition to a greener economy if we're anticipating that demand for these types of jobs would grow, so there would be less unemployment. The final thing that we're exploring with the Job Quality and Access tool and the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan are investments to help workers in lower quality jobs access higher quality jobs. So building and construction trades are anticipated to see a large increase in demand, and one of these jobs is HVAC installers and repairers is a high quality job with less access due to required certifications and training. And through the Job Quality and Access tool, we're able to see that occupations like home appliance repairers and general maintenance workers have transferable skills that could make an upward move into the HVAC technician positions. This opens opportunities to explore what we might be able to target our investments to create pipelines that help existing workers take advantage of newly generated demand in these higher quality jobs. All right. That is what I had for my presentation today.
Katie, thank you so much for that. I greatly appreciate you and all of the information you shared about the tool. I think they gave us a lot to think about. And I know that here, as a reminder, we will be taking questions from the audience. And so Kennedy's going to be watching from that Q&A box for your all questions. But to get us started here, I'd like to go ahead and jump in with some questions that the Cura team and I have. And to start with, it's clear that you put a good deal of thought into the intended uses of the tool, and you built upon existing research, existing tools, to try to take that next step. And so the first group of stakeholders that you listed there, I think it was like economic development professionals, workforce organizations or local workforce boards, planners. Could you talk a little bit more about how those folks in kind of the civic, nonprofit sector, government, local governments can leverage this information to ensure high quality jobs? You know, you hear a lot of people say good jobs as well. You know, we're bringing good jobs. These are good jobs. So whether it's a good job or a quality job, it's a big part of what a lot of folks are working on day in and day out to try to bring that to the public. So if you could share with us how they are using it, how they could use it.
Yeah, I think that in terms of how it could be used is that you could look at the jobs proposed for a development, what those jobs are, and then see how they rate in terms of job quality and access. And then you could take it a step further and if you know that in your community you've got a high percentage of single parents looking for high quality opportunities, you can adjust the tool and see how those jobs are rating specific to your community's needs based on, different aspects that you know about your community as a local practitioner. I think you could also look at it the other way and see if, you could look at those top 10 occupations for your community and see if there's opportunity for helping people move from some lower quality options into some higher quality options and seeing if there's a way to attract those types of businesses, those opportunities to your community.
Okay, very good. Another question that I have relatedly is that not all of those stakeholders are facing the same kind of opportunities and constraints. In conversations here in our area in Central Ohio, there's a lot of discussion around what makes sense maybe for bigger, denser communities versus more rural outlying communities, or what makes more sense for communities that maybe have a few very large employers already and are looking to build out those suppliers and those connections and things of that nature. So when you have a tool that's there for everyone to use, how did that shape things? You know, how do you look at that in terms of those different types of stakeholders who maybe are looking to get something a little bit different out of it for their community?
Yeah, I think when we were building this update to the tool to help get to that, that was actually something that our user group discussed quite a bit was, I am interested more in, for example, single mothers versus, the what is a development bringing to my community kind of question. And I think that we built the tool to have those measures that you can manipulate based on what you want to prioritize. So you can look at if you have a high percentage of individuals or you have a high percentage of women or you have a high percentage of Black community, so you maybe want to evaluate opportunities that are more accessible. You increase the weight for the demographic measure to help you kind of easily see the types of opportunities that folks currently are getting into. That could help you evaluate where you may want to invest in opportunities. I think in terms of your area, we added things like transit stops and highway, so you can kind of see with the mapping tool if there is a lot of particular workforce somewhere what kinds of connections are happening or not happening in terms of mobility? Um, and then overall, just for different users, I think a key ingredient for this tool is that it gives us all a shared language when we're talking about what a quality job is and what job access is. We've all got this data and this tool that everyone can look at and everyone can use to then further the conversation and work in collaboration to find the right answer for each situation.
Very good. Yeah, and I know that's huge. Just kind of setting that baseline. We're looking at the same numbers the same way. We're using the same words to facilitate that communication. And as things go forward, right? What are the thoughts for how to track progress or changes, depending on how folks perceive it, over time, right? So you've got these snapshots. You have some of the criteria based on expected trends that you think might happen. Do you have plans or designs for how stakeholders will be able to use this over time and say 10 years from now, look at how the mix of jobs or the quality of jobs or who has access to those jobs is changing, hopefully in aim with their program goals?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, the tool doesn't really have a good way to look backwards, but we are always scheming on how to improve the tool. We're actually about to embark on a project to update the tool and do a larger visioning for where the tool could go in the future. And so that is something that has come up, and I think we'll be exploring that further this year as we think about the future of the job quality and access tool.
Absolutely. And keep scheming. We did a lot of looking for prior art and other efforts in this space. And this is a very ambitious and wonderful tool that you all have created. Great work happening. So what a couple of things I'll dig into before my time is up and we go to the audience. Two more quick questions for me. One is, with the talk of assessing jobs for risk of automation or being replaced or reduced in number by automation, and all the talk about artificial intelligence, especially with automation potentially going into sectors or types of jobs that maybe thought they were more immune to some of those threats. Can you talk a little bit about how you went about assessing risk of automation and how AI, if you were to that point, how AI played a role in that?
Yeah, I believe that the automation risk was pulled from it's a measure that's sourced out of Lightcast. Um, we I think it's something that we'll continue to explore in terms of AI is still a new thing, and particularly in our region, there's a lot of investment happening in quantum and a lot of investment in data centers and things. And so it is a top of mind thing. I think it's still being explored. But in terms of this version of the tool, we're pulling data out of Lightcast to help understand automation risks. And I don't think that it's very AI heavy yet, but we know it's on the horizon. We got to keep our eyes. It's more future scheming.
All right, thank you for that. And there's one question here. I'll go back on script that I think is really pertinent and we haven't hit on so much. Looking at the education and workforce development side, how do you think that can help foster collaboration on that side or planning? And again, I'll say, with things changing, I've attended a lot of sessions where folks talk about the challenge of knowing what the needs are going to be by the time, our kindergartners are entering the workforce, right? So there's a little bit of a crystal ball exercise. I appreciate the tool is looking at trends, trying to look ahead, thinking about transferable skills, things will change. So what can you say about how they might be able to use this to maybe do a better job? I attended a session earlier today that said less than half of per a recent Pew poll, less than half of Americans believe that a undergraduate college degree has a positive ROI, right? And they were citing the skills and experience needed for the jobs that are available when you graduate, right? So can you talk a little bit about that on that workforce and education side? And then thank you very much. And then I'll turn it over to the audience.
Yeah. I think related to what you're saying about it feeling like undergraduate degrees are maybe a little less value, one thing that we're seeing currently is um, a need for some of the more like training based, construction kind of HVAC, electrician kind of jobs. And I think that what the tool can help us do is, I'm thinking in the context of like the comprehensive climate action plan. We're doing some work to forecast if we make these investments, we'll have these needs. You can use the tool to see what is required for those jobs that we're expecting demand to grow in. And so then we can think about what pipelines we can invest in or additional training we can make available. We can look at, for the people in those jobs currently that we want to help transition, are there additional needs that aren't as obvious, like language services or something like that? Um, so I think that with the tool and the data in the tool, um, if you're forecasting a need in something, you can really kind of have a nice deep dive into an occupation and those needs and fully explore, like, do you need to help high schoolers train? Can you take advantage of existing labor? Um, there's just a lot of ways that I think the tool helps you think about those pipelines and start to invest in your projected needs.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. Kennedy, do we have questions ready?
We do. And
Right.
Dave, well, you asked amazing questions, but there are also some great, interesting questions that have been brewing in the Q&A. So I'm gonna start asking them. We got a question saying, what household configuration are you using to benchmark the minimum living wage? The typical configuration of the region?
Yeah, I have my methodology up so that I make sure that I have the right answer. Um, I believe that we are using, the benchmark is a family of 2 adults and 2 kids, which I think is just kind of a general average, um, and not necessarily exactly what the region is currently.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you for the clarification. Someone else asked, how is the automation risk identified?
Yeah, that is, um, I'm fairly certain that that is a measure that we're able to source out of Lightcast. So Lightcast is providing that measure in their background,
Okay.
in their data e stuff.
I like it, data e stuff. All right, well, we have another question. What is the source for your county level rents?
The county level rents, this isn't something that's in the job quality and access tool. I believe that the team is using information from ACS, the community survey.
That makes sense. All right. Well, we have one more question, and that is there a way that a local government with less technical resources could create a tool like this, but more simple? Are there a few key data sets that would get more or less the same results? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, that is an interesting question, and it's we recently did a presentation on this tool and got a similar question. I think that um, in a less detailed way, you can start to get at some of this information by looking at wages compared to the living wage of your area, and you can really start to get a feel for quality that way. Um, for us, in terms of calculating the living wage, we're using the MIT calculator, so that's something that I'm pretty sure is available for it's at least available for a number of regions. I don't know about local level. And then wages you can you can get a feel for them from the census. So yeah, I think you can look at you can start to look at that. Otherwise, it is a question that we're going to be chewing on in this update too, because it is a need that we're starting to hear as well. It's a good, yeah, it's a tricky one because we put a lot into. We're looking at each very tiny aspects that all build up into quality. But I do think wages are a good indicator. They're a good like what's a
Yeah, for
litmus
sure.
test for um, how well how well people are able to live with the occupation that they have.
Are you saying that the livable wage and as well in comparison to wages of the particular area, what the average wages are in the particular, or like the median income or?
Yeah, I think you could do median income. I think that there are some additional, more detailed resources if you can find, for example, your top 10 occupations and then look at those earnings in particular. I think you'd get a really good feel pretty quickly. Um, and you can get, I'm sorry, I said census, but you can get earning percentiles from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's where you get salaries.
See any other questions in the Q&A? Dave, do you have any additional questions that are?
Yeah, so while we wait for those to come in, I've got more. I wanted to leave plenty of time for the audience, but I've got some more questions. And Katie, I'd like to keep pulling that thread of not just how the tool you've created can be used in your area, but what went into creating this, what next steps look like. Because we often see like a shining example that really deserves to be replicated in some way, maybe adapted and adopted, but I don't think there's a need to recreate the wheel here, right? To do everything from scratch. So the types of questions folks ask us, I think, everything from how did this get started? How did this end up being owned? At CMAP, there's a lot of organizations that can maybe have done this or hosted this. To, how much time did it take? What was the budget like? What kind of nitty-gritty, like, we've seen the end result. This is awesome. Let's assume there are folks online who are like, I would love to do this at our organization. Now, maybe it's at a smaller scale, like one of the questioners put in, can we pull some of this data? But to get to where you all got, can you tell us kind of the story of like, here's how we got pulled into this, and here's how we got buy-in, and the budget, the timeline, the scope got determined, those kind of things. Whatever you think would really be helpful if someone's sitting there thinking, man, I wish we had this in our area.
I can do my best. I'm not I usually don't have to do much with budgets. But in terms of how the tool came to be, I talked a bit about some of the planning work that we did in terms of the regional plan and then those industry clusters. We have a regional economic committee, and in our region, there's also some effort to create the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, which has now been established for a few years. And so there's a lot of momentum around kind of collaborating around economy, and we had identified these needs around data. And for CMAP, one of our kind of key roles for the region is providing data. Um, you know, we provide a whole slew of different data resources like community data profiles and recently added housing data profiles for each community in our region. And so this is, I think, an extension of that role of providing the data. And then for CMAP as well, I see one of our key roles in the region as being uh, a resource to help people collaborate and help bring different partners together to have conversations. And so, you know, with this tool being data focused and ultimately having that shared language being a tool for collaboration, it really fits well for CMAP in those ways. So this tool, TIP Strategies was our consultant that helped build the original tool, and they also helped with the update to the tool. Um, I want to say that the tool update was in terms of budget, I think it was about $90,000. So it's, you know, it's not super cheap. It's also not the most expensive planning activity that I've ever seen a budget for. Um, and I think there are some other places that TIP Strategies has uh, you know, they built this tool with us and have now worked with other communities or organizations to do something similar regionally, but also locally. A lot of economic development organizations have worked with TIP to build similar tools now. And I think some municipalities have built municipal focused tools with TIP. Um, yeah, I think that covered everything.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so you mentioned that collaborative process in developing those tools, right? So you got the budget, you got the outside resource. Um, I think you were doing something maybe not totally new, but there's a lot of new here in terms of how the data is presented, what data is presented together. And I know you've got those stakeholders in mind. Those stakeholders included individuals, right? I remember from your slide, the individual, job seekers. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, right? Creating that shared vision of here's what it will look like, here's how you will interact with it, here's how we'll display this information in a way that makes sense to probably like, a data director at a planning organization somewhere, and also, one of those folks in the community thinking like, hey, what do these green jobs pay? I heard about this solar installation stuff or whatever, right? So you got both the stakeholders, maybe kind of like different ends of kind of their maybe data literacy or that kind of thing. How did you land here? I'll just go on record. I'm the data director at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and I really like this. So anything you can share about how you got to where you are, I would love to hear.
Yeah, a big way that we got to where the tool is now is that that user group that we utilized. You know, there's already within that group diverse perspectives. We had some very data focused folks, but then we had more kind of workforce. I work on submitting grants, kind of people on this team. Um, and so that helped us when we're thinking about how you interact with the tool. I will say I don't think, in terms of a lay person interacting with the tool, we're not perfect yet. Always room to improve. But, you know, by playing with the tool and having a wide spectrum on our user group play with the tool, we were able to identify, you know, some of the language that, you know, for planners maybe feels obvious, like industry clusters or traded clusters or, you know, those kinds of things, and identify those terms that needed to be highlighted and defined. And we added the informational pop-up, uh, you know, so what data is going into it and what this tool is doing for you were all additions to hopefully help help make it more user-friendly and be able to support a diverse group of people using the tool to answer their questions about job quality and job access.
Very good. So as we get towards the closer to the end of our hour here, looking ahead, so I'm assuming you've gotten some feedback. You've mentioned you're doing an update, probably internal feedback, I'm guessing, stakeholders. So what have folks said, is working, or what have folks said, oh, it'd be really great if you added this. Can you give us a peek, maybe a little bit of the rationale behind the updates? Obviously, data updates incrementally, but anything else that folks have said is really working well for them, or ads that might be coming in the future with these updates?
Yeah, so the original reason for the update is that the data that goes into the tool about every 3 years, it's time for an update. Enough of the data is updated that it's worth the investment to update the tool. Um, I think if I were to forecast a few things that we've heard, in promoting the tool, when we talk about job access, a thing that comes top of mind for almost everyone when we've presented the tool is transit access. And so I think I could foresee, if not the current update, a future update, including looking at transit and uh, where jobs are in proximity to frequent transit, and where you can get. Uh, I think another data set, if I'm dreaming big, another data set that CMAP provides for the region is the Northeast Illinois Development Database, which is tracking all the new or planned developments happening throughout our region. I think there is some interesting opportunity there to look at proposed developments and the jobs that are proposed with those developments, figure out some comparison with the workforce around those jobs, do something interesting with that. Um, I think hopefully an easier update. Currently, the outputs for the tool are just PDFs. I would like to see us explore some improvements on kind of what those outputs are and seeing if there's a way to give people more data that they can, do a little bit more with once it's out of the tool that's not just a PDF, or a profile that is a little more easy to understand for a lay person. So I think there's just so many opportunities, so many ways that we can um, build on what we've started.
Very good, very good. This has been an excellent conversation. And I guess real quick, I'll check back with Kennedy. Any last minute questions that we can get in the next 60 seconds from our audience?
Yeah, if anyone has a last minute question, you're free to ask it. If not, we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. So,
All right. So you guys have 30 seconds, and I can do the closing remarks quickly. And Katie, when you take those next steps, looking at those proposed developments, I'd be very interested to touch base, moving from that planning and that hypothetical and what should we be pushing for to that kind of evaluation of actual projects. And along with that word quality, I know in some spaces it can be controversial to provide a rating. Are you saying this is not a quality job? Are you saying because this is a male-dominated industry, it's not accessible, and those kind of things? When it gets to those real projects that are existing and the stakeholders already have buy-in to, um, um, uh, you could get into an interesting space there. So I'll be following along with your progress and continuing to celebrate it. I really appreciate it. Okay, Kennedy, it's now or never. I think we're wrapping up.
yes, I think we're gonna gonna be wrapping up.
Okay. Well, Katie, again, thank you so much on behalf of Kerwin Institute, on behalf of Cura at The Ohio State University, and on behalf of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. We're so happy and lucky to have you here today and learn more about your exciting work. For everyone, this is part of an ongoing series. And so our next webinar for the Data for Access and Opportunity series will be on Friday, November 7th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., so a little bit earlier, not right at lunchtime. And the focus will be, what are the consequences of carceral technologies and how can we resist them? With Kim Reynolds, who co-leads the US-based research and organizing collective, Our Data Bodies. We hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining today and have a great weekend.